welcome to come to our workshop this evening. Harry Overstreet, I'm the Small Business Support Services Post-Award Administrator, and I want to welcome you to tonight's workshop on change orders, lump sum versus time and materials. So tonight, I want to introduce Kawana Dyson is our team member, and we'll give you some information about etiquette in terms of how we handle the workshop.
All right, cool. So welcome everyone. I'm going to actually have everyone that's not going to be presenting or speaking just yet to mute themselves, just to kind of avoid the echo. But just to kind of go over like Zoom, if you're new to it, most of you have probably been doing Zoom for the past year since the pandemic. But if you look at the graphic here, we have like some navigations of where to go to kind of look at or to unmute yourself. So basically in the lower left corner, you'll have a mute button, and then you will unmute to talk. You can turn your camera on or off with the stop video button. And then what else is important? So if for any reason you need to like post any questions or have any anything that you want to comment about, you can use the chat box, which is like right in the middle. There's a little icon that says chat. So you can click on that to communicate with the other members in the program right now, or you can also just send a direct message or post your questions there. Towards the end, we'll also have a live Q&A where you can actually kind of raise your hand under reactions. You can raise your hand to ask a question live as well. Looks like the screen went away, but that's pretty much it in general with Zoom. So if you have any questions, those are pretty much the basic concepts and navigations for Zoom that you're going to be utilizing. If you have any other questions, we'll definitely want to be mindful of your background noises and limit the distractions. And just by simply muting yourself when you're not speaking could help out with that. And so, yeah, so we're looking forward to your questions that you're going to be asking as well. This is the best time to get all your questions in while we have the expert, Nick Hochin, hopefully I said your name right, on with us. And that's it. So welcome to the workshop.
Thank you, Kawana. So again, I'm Harry Overstreet, and I'm going to keep my spiel very quick. I am the Small Business Support Services Post-Award Project Administrator. And what I want to do is I'm going to give you a brief overview of our program. The mission of our program is to help you succeed on your BART contracts. So real quick, the Small Business Support Services we have basically two contracts, two halves to our program. There's a pre-award services, which is designed to help you pursue and secure BART contracts, BART work. And then there is the post-award services, for which I am the project administrator, which is designed to help you keep your work. And once you get the work, we know that we have engineers who are able to assist with the various procedures, such as dealing with the contract and supplementary conditions, health and safety plans, certified payroll, the change order process, which is critical, which we'll be addressing today. All these are various procedures that we're able to assist you with. And so again, here's a little more about our program and how the program works. And what's really unique about our program is that we're able to communicate with all of the different parties within the construction process. So that we communicate directly with the BART CM teams, the management, BART management, and all the various contractors at the various levels. Our technical assistance is provided in a one-on-one environment or to a group. Prior to COVID, it was done in person. A lot is done online now, and of course, we'll be moving to doing both as everything opens up, ideally. And these are just a couple of the various procedures that we're able to help with that have created a lot of issues for small businesses in general. So next up, to address the really critical information that we are presenting today is Nick Houchin, a good friend and team member. He's a resident engineer with the Allen Group, has a lot of BART experience, and Nick is up next.
Thank you, Harry. I appreciate it. So first of all, I'm really happy to be able to speak to you guys today and answer any questions you have. So feel free to answer, ask any question you feel you have. No question is a bad question when it comes to this process, because I know it can provide challenges to even the big contractors, small contractors. So please ask your questions. So a little bit about myself. I'm a resident engineer at the Allen Group. I've had 10 years in the engineering and construction industry, and specifically, I have 7 years of experience on BART projects, in managing BART projects. On those projects, I've specialized in change order, change notice processing, pay applications, field modifications. That's kind of where my wheelhouse has been with BART. So I've had a lot of experience processing change orders, change notices, done hundreds and hundreds of them in my career. So I feel like I've gotten a good grasp of the topic, but I still, even after that, I have questions myself when I'm going through it. So it's not the simplest process, but if I'm hoping I can break it down in a way that answers some of your questions and provide you insight you need. Can you go to the next slide, please? Just a little background. These are some of the projects I've worked on. I'm currently on Market Street Entry Canopies project and managing. It's a $65 million project, but also done Hayward Maintenance Complex, $120 million project, and a couple of smaller projects for the M&E Group. Next slide, please. So just overview of what we're going to talk about today. First, going to go over change notice and change order process to try to break that down for you so you can understand how it works at BART. Then I'm going to specifically get into lump sum change orders and your cost proposals, how they should be structured. Then speak about force account work, NTP, NTE, which is notice to proceed, not to exceed, and how that process should work, things you should be looking for. And then examples, lessons learned, and that's something I'm probably just going to weave in throughout these topics. But that's what we'll be discussing today. All right, next question. Or next slide, please. So starting with, step one is what are triggering these changes. And I think this is a good place to start because this is where it all begins, right? Normally the most common issues are design changes, right? So something that wasn't in your contract or you don't feel is in your contract or in the design, whether that's the specifications or the contract drawings. There's something in there that is either not clear or is an oversight, or there's a coordination issue between two different trades, say the electrical drawings and the mechanical drawings don't line up. That will trigger, an RFI from the contractor or a serial letter from the contractor. All right, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
I can
Okay,
now.
sorry, this thing's just
Yes.
glitched for a second there. I don't know, where did I cut out, just for my information? Oop. Can you hear me now?
It's about 15 or 20 seconds, Nick.
Okay.
You were talking about RFIs and serial letters.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry about that. But what I was saying is that, what's really critical, what kicks it all off is that the contractor, issues an RFI stating, I have this question, or there's something in the drawings that I see is is either unclear, and ask for direction from the district about how to proceed. That design change could be something, say for an example, we have a panel that needs to go in this location, but what you're specifying won't work. And so then the design team comes back and says, actually, we need to change the panel to something else. That's your step in saying, hey, this is a change to my contract. This wasn't included in my bid. I request for a change to be issued for me to proceed on this work. So design changes is very common, but also the design change could be from the owner side saying that there's something that I want to add to your contract that wasn't in there. Here's a change notice to add this as part of your contract. And I'll get into more details about the other parts of the process, but it's going over the typical triggers. Differing site conditions. That is another very common trigger for a change. You're out there digging a trench. You've discovered a big slab of concrete in the way that wasn't in the plans. You have to stop. That's your time to issue something in writing to your RE, or if you're a subcontractor, to your prime contractor stating, hey, I found something out here that wasn't in my design or in my plans. I can't proceed. Please provide direction on how to proceed. Operating system delays is another common problem. At BART, we give you our typical schedules when you can do your work, but BART's an active operating system. Things happen. They have to change their schedules. There's emergencies. They can't let you in. That's an impact to the contractor. Then you should claim that impact and say, I was impacted. A lot of times there's even allowances built into the contract to pay for those delays. And so you really check your bid items, see what the allowances are there for, because the point of those allowances are to be able to quickly pay and have money set aside for these problems that the district is expecting to happen. Time extensions, I'm not going to get a lot into time extensions in this presentation, because time extensions are really their own issue. And there's actually already been a workshop on that, on time impact analysis by the SBSS program. So I'd say, look for that for more information. Where I would tie that into this is you should, make it clear what impacts are part of this change that's been issued to you. So if they're adding scope and it impacts your completion date, even if you don't know exactly how much of an impact it will be, you can make it very clear to the district or to your prime contractor that, hey, this isn't a time impact to me, and I'm going to be, I withhold my rights to seek additional time due to this change. So, and just overall, when we talk about triggers, it's really imperative that you have something in writing to the district or to your prime contractor stating, what you want to change, or you feel this is a change, and to put the onus on them to issue something to you formally. All right, next slide, please. All right, so that brings us to the change notice. The change notice is the first step in the change notice change order process. So when you get past that point, say the RFI was answered, hey, we need to change, we need to add scope to your project to make this work. Or say there's a trench and the slab's in the way, we need to pay you to move that slab of concrete out of the way to keep the trench, keep your trench in progress going. They'll issue a change notice, and the change notice will give you the scope, and then it will be either one of two types of change notices. There's the cost proposal change notice, which is saying you cannot proceed with the work, but here's the scope of work we want you to provide a cost for, so that we can determine if we want to proceed with this or come to an agreement on the price before we give you the notice to proceed. The second type is a notice to proceed not to exceed, which is often called a NTP, NTE. That type of change notice is going to tell you to immediately proceed with the work. And then it's going to give you a not to exceed amount, say, $10,000, that you can start to expense. This is, force account work. You're going to have to track with tags, your day-to-day basis, and have the ability to track your costs because you have to start the work immediately. So those are the two types of change notices you'll see, and I'll have an example in the next slide. But the big thing too is to check the GCs. This GC 4.2.1 is where you'll see more information on the change notices. It's really critical to read the general conditions because there's a lot of information in there about change orders, claims, time impacts. You really need to look into that. Next slide. So here's just an example of two change notices that you will see. On the left side, you see that there's a cost proposal change notice, which, and if you read the language under the cost proposal, it says, not authorized to proceed with the work. And then on top of that, it tells you provide a cost proposal within 10 days. So that's one type. And then onto the right side, you see the notice to proceed not to exceed. That will tell you how much you can expense, but and that you're proceeding on force account. The part that I also want to bring attention to is the 75% notification. So you're supposed to notify the district when you are about to exceed the 75% of the amount they authorized you, which means you really need to be on top of tracking your costs for force account. Something that really becomes a problem for this contractors or subcontractors is when, say the district's issued a change notice with a $10,000 not to exceed amount, and then all of a sudden we get a notice that they've spent $40,000 already of work out in the field on that change. According to the change notice, you were not authorized to spend that extra amount. So really, you're kind of going out on your own risk once you proceed past the amount that's been given to you. So to save that headache and trouble, it's really be on top of your tags, and I'll go into that later in this presentation. And then I wanted to highlight one more thing is that even though this is a force account, start under force account, if you read that last sentence, it says to provide a cost proposal within 10 days. So really still the goal on all these change notices and change orders is to try to come to some type of lump sum agreement. We all understand that force account work is burdensome to track for both the district and the contractor. So we all kind of try to working towards some negotiated costs for even if it's a notice to proceed not to exceed. Next slide. So the next step, say you've issued your cost proposal, we come to an agreement. Now we say, okay, the next step is to issue a change order that finalizes that cost. That agreement will be shown in the change order language for how much money you're going to be paid, if there's being days added to the contract, how many days are being added. And this change order, it's kind of the last step. And I wanted to bring a common issue I see is contractors sometimes they don't realize, especially if they're new, they don't realize they have to get that change order before they can get paid. Even though you have a change notice in place, and if that change notice gives you a notice to proceed under force account, you still can't get paid in an invoice until the change order is issued. Because the way it works within BART financing, the way the invoicing works is that BART has a set amount of money set aside for base contract work. And then every time a change order is added, unless it's out of an allowance, they have to create a new line item in their accounting system that allocates that extra money to the contract. So that doesn't happen until a change order is issued. And so what we hate to see is that, a change notice has been issued to proceed with the work. Then you've been working for like 3 months, the change order still hasn't been issued. And now, it's now that issue is that you've been working for 3 months, financing that change without being paid. So as the sub or as the prime, you really need to be aware that you need to push for that change order and try to get to that change order agreement as quickly as possible. There is one avenue that you can go if they say you're doing force account work for change orders. We can issue a change order that's a notice to proceed not to exceed. That's like a part 1 change order. And what that change order does, it will just set aside, $20,000. Let's say we give you a $20,000 not to exceed limit, and it will set aside that $20,000, and now you can start to bill from that amount. So that is a step. If you're doing a lot of force account work, you can say, hey, we should issue a notice to proceed not to exceed change order, so then you can start billing from it. It doesn't happen all the time. It's much more common to just have one change order. So there's a part 1 and part 2. When you do that, the part 1 will open up the $20,000, and then the part 2 will finalize what the actual cost was. Say you actually expensed $15,000. The part 2 will show that 5,000 of that wasn't used. The final cost was 15,000. But I see that as a stumbling block a lot, that you get stuck in the change notice process, work is happening, and then the contractor's worked a few months and still hasn't been paid for that change work that they've been doing out in the field. So you really got to be on top of that, and pushing it if you're not getting it. And the last thing I would bring up is, if there's a dispute, say there's work that you're that the district or the prime is saying is part of the contract, and you're having to do it, and you dispute the entitlement of who owns that scope of work, there's the whole claim NOPC process, notice of potential claim process, in the general conditions that you should follow. You want to provide something in writing. Typically, try to do it as soon as possible. It says within 48 hours, but if you're proceeding with work that you don't have a change order for because there's a dispute over who's entitled to that scope of work, you need to just do your job of providing documentation stating your case, that you are proceeding with the work, but that you feel this is a change. And that's something that you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of your rights as a contractor. But that, I'm not going to get heavily into that, but that's part of this process if you don't feel a change order has been issued for scope that needs to be. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what a change order typically is going to look like. This one's a little different, and I wanted to show you it because if a change order is paid out of an allowance, say different site condition, there's a different site condition allowance, the contract price is actually not going to change. It's just, they're just going to be able to bill out of that money that's already been included in the contract. And so what you'll see is there's going to be language put in there. If you see in the middle, the actual language is going to tell you how much you're going to be able to be billed out of the allowance for this item, for this scope of work. So in this example, it says, they can bill 35,000 out of bid item 29. But then if you look down below, it says the contract price will be increased by $0. So I've seen this a lot of times. It'll freak out or scare a sub or scare a contractor, like, what, am I going to be paid $0? No, it's just, that's why it tells you how much you can bill out of it in the actual scope, but it's actually not changing the contract price because that money was included in the bid. We can go to the next slide, please. So that was kind of an overview of the process. The next step is, say you are preparing your cost proposal for a change. The cost proposals is where a lot of times things get held up, and I've seen this on a lot of jobs. The cost proposal has a lot of errors in it in terms of how BART wants to see things. So just to go over this, if you go to GC 4.2.2, it really breaks down what you need to provide. And I know a lot of times the general conditions you are overlooked, but it's really critical to read this section. The common things that I see that hold up a cost proposal are the markups aren't applied. Can you just go to the next slide real quick? I'm going to go back to this one, but I want to go to the next slide first. So the markups are clearly spelled out in the GCs. Typically, it's the 22% for labor, 15 for equipment, 15 for material, and 5 for subcontractor work. These markups are all that you're allowed to add on top of the what you're billing for, and they need to be clearly shown in your cost proposal how you're applying them. And they cover, overhead, they cover small tools, any tools under $500 of value, the markup, it covers that, and it explains in the GCs what items the markup covers. So I'll show you an example of a good cost proposal in a second, but I just wanted to show that it's really clear what the markup should be. And this, like if you're an RE and you get something that has the wrong markups, you have to reject it, immediately, because it can't be acceptable. Can you go back a slide? So the next thing is the material costs. Basically, we need to see documentation that proves the cost that you're saying or the cost of this change are real. So if you have a material, you need to provide a material invoice from the supplier that shows what their cost is to you to provide that material. If it's a, steel, or if you're providing, say a transformer, we need to see that cost from the supplier that says, yeah, this transformer costs $4,000 and here it is. If you don't have that level of detail, it's hard as the RE, we can't substantiate what your costs you're incurring to the contractor. So that's a very common issue I see. The other one is equipment rates. So we typically follow Caltrans rates. And so if you following Caltrans rates, it's really pretty easy to show your costs for the equipment you're going to use on the project. But we also want to show how you break down your equipment into, I'm going to have a excavator, a truck. I'm going to have a dump truck. Like what size of dump truck are you going to have to use? That level of detail really makes it easy to get these things in. And the last thing is labor rates. So, there's labor rates, you have the prevailing wage, union rates, but it's not just their wages, it's also fringe benefits. So it's a fully loaded labor rate. And what I typically do on jobs, and what's a good practice, is try to establish an agreed labor rate for each type of your trades, whether it's a carpenter or a foreman. Build that into a document that shows the fully loaded costs, including fringe benefits, and get an agreement in the front end of the project on what your labor rates will be for that. And I know it changes on a year-to-year basis, but say for that next year. That way, when you get the cost proposal, the RE gets the cost proposal, they don't even have to, look into how you got those labor rates. They just check to make sure they match with what you already agreed upon, and you don't even have to think about it. Can you go two slides up? Yeah, one more.
Is that good, Nick? Like one more?
Next slide. Perfect. So like I'm talking about, here's a good example of a cost proposal from a contractor. So you can see they clearly break these things down into the categories that the markups apply to. There's labor. There's a whole labor section that shows each of the tradespeople that are out there, how many hours, how many of them. It also, shows it according to the scope of work they're going to be working on. Then it shows you the material, like each of the items that they're going to be, how they're getting to that material cost. It shows your subcontractor work, equipment, and these are all broken out into their own items. And then over here on the right side, it shows you how the markup is being applied, how they're getting their total cost for each of these items. This is what the RE is going to want to see on the job. They're going to want to see it broken down in this format because this is how BART's markups and costs are allowable costs are able to be billed to the district. And so basically, by doing these things, you're going to limit the amount of time you're spending on trying to get something improved, and you're going to be able to focus the conversation on like what actually matters and not like what format is it in and what markups are being applied. You can actually focus your negotiations on how many man hours do you think this costs, and what type of equipment, how many hours does that equipment need to be out there? Are your material costs right? Like that's what you should be focusing your negotiation on, not on did you apply a 15% markup or a 17% markup, right? I mean, that type of takes away from what really matters. And this will allow you to get your go from a change notice to a change order that allows you to get paid and allows the work to proceed much, much quicker. Can you go to the next slide? So just moving on, I mean, we talked about the cost proposal process, but moving on to force account work. So the critical item with force account work is just that you have your force account sheets daily signed by both parties, by the contractor's rep that's on site and by the district's rep on site, which is typically an inspector. You have an agreement on the material that was used that day for that scope of work, the labor, the amount of people that were out there, how many hours they spent on that scope, and the equipment hours that were used. And these sheets need to be filled out daily, and they need to be submitted daily to the district. Really what the worst thing that happens is if these aren't filled out, 3 months goes by, all of a sudden there's like, hey, I spent all this time and energy on this change, like, and then you're having to like recreate force account sheets. And then as the district, you're having to review these, days of work that happened months ago, and you're having to look at inspection reports to see if it even happened. And, sometimes you're just going to get a flat rejection saying, we didn't have an agreement on these costs. We didn't know this was even a change at the time. That's why that's where I see a stumbling block is the tags aren't done. Because if you have those tags done daily, as a contractor, you're in this small business, you're really protecting yourself, because it's really hard for the district to refute those costs when there was someone there that day that saw the work and signed off on it from the district side saying, yes, this work did happen. It happened for change notice 10. This is how many people were out there working on it. That's really protects you as the small business. And otherwise you're just kind of leaving it up to the interpretation of, months later of were they out there, were they, how many hours did they spend? And you're kind of taking on risk when you don't need to. The other part of this is you need to take this information, these sheets, and actually start tabulating them. I think it's actually a good practice to weekly submit your costs to the district to say, here's how much I've expensed. That's too soon, maybe every 2 weeks, but you need to kind of have a tabulation of here's my costs I've incurred on this change so far. And that ties in with the last point, which is if you're doing that, then you'll know when you're getting close to that 75% of the amount that you're allowed to expense. And you can, put the onus on the district or on your prime contractor, if you're a sub, to say, hey, look, I'm authorized to spend 10,000. I'm at like 7,000 right now. I'm just letting you know, like pretty soon we're going to reach our limit, and you need to issue me another change notice that gives me the authority to keep working. Because otherwise I don't have the authority to keep working. I've used all the money that I've been allowed to. And that's a big part of this is by you documenting and providing the right information, you're just shifting the risk from yourself onto the other party, because you've made it clear what the challenges you're having or what you're facing, and you've made your case to them, and you have something to show for that. And it's not just months later that you come back and say, actually, that was a lot more work than we thought. And no fault to yourself, it was more complicated than maybe everyone assumed, and you're having to expense a lot more money. If you can go to the next slide. So just an example, there's some different formats that people use, but just to show you the force account sheet. So you can see we're not tracking cost in this. It's only for time and for tracking. So a lot of times you'll see the statement that it's not a guarantee in payment, because sometimes force account sheets are filled out for items that haven't totally been agreed upon that are changes. So you'll see that sometimes for work that involves claims or issues like that. But basically what you're going to see is that someone reviewed this with the people out in the field and came to an agreement on the number of hours that were spent by the crew, by the equipment, whatever material was used, and sign off on it. These sheets all get accumulated by the contractor and then submitted in saying, here's how many hours I expensed, here's the rates or how much all these items cost, and here's my total cost for this work. If there's any question about whether the work you're doing is force account or not, I see this as a problem. Is it gets really hard when, say, like one part of a scope is change notice and the other part isn't. That's where it'd really be good to just have that conversation with the owner or with the prime to have an understanding of, like, here's the portion of the scope. Half my time today is going to be on change notice work, and half of it's going to be on doing standard base contract work, so that there isn't this big debate afterwards. So, communication is key on this stuff. As the district and as, they really don't want to be going after people, right? They want to be fair. And as an RE, you're trying to be fair, but typically what happens is we don't have all the information, and then it becomes a debate afterwards about who owes what to who. And you can avoid that by just good communication. Let's see, can we go to the next question? Next slide, please. So just to go over in summary, just to state first, this presentation is to try to give you, like, where I see are the biggest stumbling blocks when it comes to these items. But the SBSS program is here all the time. So if there's a question I haven't answered, or there's still something that you run into on your projects, please reach out to our group, and we'll provide that information later. But please reach out to our group. We can answer those questions in that forum. We can provide our services to help you through these processes, because every change notice and every change order is unique. And sometimes there's very specific challenges that pop up with those scopes of work that just don't really fall into a nice clean bucket. There's different type of issues you'll face that maybe I didn't talk about, but that we do have experience on and could help you through. So I just wanted to make that clear. But just to provide a recap, really important to document what's causing the change and to make it clear if you feel this is a change to your work or not, through RFI or serial letter or an email to the district. Be aware of design changes, different site conditions, delays due to access. And then for lump sum cost proposals, the big thing is just documentation. Really try to provide detail. We don't want to get in this process of where you provide one big lump sum costs without detail, then they get sent back. And then you submit something and then the markups are incorrect and they get sent back. And then you submit that, and then it's there's no backup on the material costs, and then it gets sent back. That's a terrible process for everyone involved. No one wants to get in that, and it's really frustrating, especially if you feel like you didn't know what they were looking for before you went into it. So that's just like, if you can have that information ready on the front end, you're really going to just skip those steps and be able to get into the negotiation part. And then for force account work, it's just really being on top of your T&M tags and making sure that everyone understands that change notice work is taking place that day and you need to track it. Because if you just let the work happen and you have to go back, it's going to be difficult for everyone. So that's overall, that's my my presentation for today. If anyone has any questions, I'm really happy to answer them. And then, like I said, we're here all the time, so reach out if not in this forum and through our group.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick. So are there? I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so I can see everybody that's here. Well, our last slide, of course. We'll probably get a survey out to you. We'd like to get some feedback on how you feel about the workshop. And we want to thank you for, of course, for attending the workshop. Are there any other questions from anybody in regard to into the change order process?
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I
I
can.
can hear you.
This is Nolan. We're working with Lanting on the Richmond fence project for BART. So we're in the process of a change order right now. There was a design change to increase the sizes of the fence posts pretty early on, like a month after we received notice to proceed on the project. And ever since then, we've kind of been down this process trying to negotiate a fair amount. So we ended up submitting our cross proposal to BART. It was a lump sum. It was in the amount of 250,000 or so, something like that. It came back and ultimately they gave us a notice to proceed for $100,000 to start that work. But in this case, the $100,000 didn't even cover our material costs. So since then, we've issued a notice of potential claim. We're kind of going down that process. But in that case, do you have any advice on how we would proceed with that when we're given $100K not to exceed when we can't even order material with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was talking about, where each change is its own unique challenge, like what you're facing. So, I mean, I think what you said, at least the NOPC process is something that would be the right process to at least state at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And to make your case for how this is impacting you and why even, $100,000 change doesn't even allow you to proceed, because it's going to be much more expensive than that. So I think what you're doing is, I think that's the correct path. At least the path I would see is, yes, you make sure you have your NOPC in, you providing your full case for how this is impacting your team, what your challenges are, why the $100,000 isn't enough to cover this scope. So they could either do one or two things. If they have they issued any type of change order yet, or is it just the change notice?
It was the change order with the not to exceed of 100,000. So
it does allow you to, are you able to bill for at least 100,000?
Well, the problem is we can't even order, you mentioned the 75%, like notifying them once we spend 75%, but I think our material cost in that alone was 140,000. So, I mean, we could order $75,000 worth of material and get that to the site. We can't even install it because we already hit that 75%.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking that because at least, I mean, if you're going to proceed with it, this is where like you have to have a really good backup for what your real costs are, show how it's real. Mm-hmm. And then you as a contractor making the decision whether if you've given a notice proceed, is it actually something that you could financially handle proceeding with? Because I mean, I think that's kind of the big difference is, say if you're off by $20,000, but typically as a contractor, we want you to keep moving and proceed with the work, even if there is a dispute. And that's the point of the claims process. But I know the challenge is the contractor, if you say, okay, well, if I do proceed with this and I'm not paid, I'm going to be, underwater. But so I understand that's the problem. So that's where it gets, you just like, if you're at that wall, if you've shown your cost, you've provided your writing, things aren't proceeding, you can, worst case, you start to escalate things. You say, we need to move this up levels and have a discussion so we can agree and move forward.
Mhm.
Because the last thing we want to see on a contract is, stop notices, work not proceeding. So it seems like this, if this is a clear material cost issue, you should be able to escalate this thing and get it resolved. It shouldn't be like, it's not like you're dealing with some unknown. So I feel like you should be able to escalate this problem up, because BART doesn't want to see the contract stop either. So I would say provide all the information you can and then ask for it to be escalated to the point where someone can just make an agreement and move forward.
Okay. Yeah, because now, we've been, it's been 6 months since it was initially brought up, and, there were design changes. So we haven't ordered material. So there's a lot of delays associated with just this change order. But, we're working through it with the notice of potential claim. But yeah, I wasn't sure how that worked. If they're issuing us a notice to proceed with work, and for $100K, obviously when it doesn't even cover material costs. So definitely a unique situation. But yeah, it's been a difficult process.
Yeah, and that's where I say communication is the biggest thing. Like if you as a contractor at a point where you're like, this is just not going to work, we're not going to be able to do this, like, especially for something that's as simple as like, hey, here's a material cost. That should be an issue that should be able to be escalated and some type of agreement is made. I don't know all the details of your situation, but I would say that's the point, is try to get it moving up the ladder.
Okay.
I have a quick question, piggybacking off of Nolan. Just, is there a particular, maybe Harry, maybe this is a question for you or Nick, but who would you escalate it with? Is there a particular person that you would start with?
Well, yeah, I'll just say from the CM side, from ours, typically the way you would have, dispute resolution work is you start at the, there's project team level, our project manager from the contractor and then from the RE, then you would escalate that up to the BART PM and the equivalent from the contractor side. Then if they can't come to an agreement there, it gets escalated up to group managers. So whatever the BART group manager is of that project. And then all else fails, it could go even higher. But typically, you're not going to have to go over BART group manager. Normally, you can come to an agreement somewhere along that process. But that would be the typical escalation process in terms of the actual CM contractor team.
And if I could add to that, Nick, I believe partnering also is a area for that. And how you doing, Nolan? I'm glad you're with us and you joined us this afternoon. So Nolan and Perimeter Security is a general contractor on that contract. So in terms of resolution, I think I would assume that they have a partnering allowance, and that there should be, I would assume, some room for partnering, and that would be the the area for to escalate, to take that issue up.
Yeah, and like I said, just if you feel you can't proceed without guarantee of payment, then that's just, you have to put that in writing as your argument that the $100,000 doesn't even allow you to proceed. You can't proceed with that amount, and this is what you need to actually be able to proceed. That would be the best course of action, at least from my point of view.
Okay, great. Was there anything else with that, Nolan? Did that answer your question? Hopefully. Yeah,
that's a good start. I think I'll get with Jeff and we can try to put our questions together. I was out last week, so I have a little bit of catching up to do as far as where we're at with it, but we'll be sure to reach out if we have more questions.
Yeah, and again, continue to reach out to Luis also, because I know you've been working with him.
Yep.
Discussing that also. That's great. If I could reach out to Mr. Fleming, Kenneth Fleming, how are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good. How you doing?
Good, good. I just wanted to acknowledge that you're here. We don't have a lot of contractors here, but you are here. We appreciate that. What company are you with, if I might ask?
With Allberry Glass, and I'm actually
Oh.
on 2 BART projects as we speak.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm very familiar with Allberry Glass. Be sure to send Sean our best. We know
most
that you're on-
definitely.
Absolutely. We know you're on the Canopies project and BHQ. I've seen some of you guys out at BHQ working.
At the BART headquarters.
Yes.
I had a question though. Wanted to know about the change orders, and well, I know why, because they have so many. But as an owner or as a GC, the change orders sit for so long, and then when they do approve it or deny the RFI or whatever, we don't have the time. So 6 months later to 3 months. What do you recommend of how to proceed without it taking long for a change order?
I would just say in general, sometimes if you're a sub, the issues can be between other information that is between the prime and the owner. And so the critical thing is just to document what your challenges are and push them forward to the prime, and say, hey, I'm stuck, I need direction, or we need to push this forward, otherwise here's my impacts, and make that clear so they can pass that along to the owner. So I just documentation is key. If you can provide an argument in writing and make sure try to get that pushed forward to the owner through the prime, then it may provide perspective that the owner doesn't know, or maybe the prime doesn't know, of challenges that are happening, and then they can work to resolve them. Because that's a lot of times things get stuck because of other issues aren't related to the sub. That can happen sometimes.
Okay, thank you. Because it sounds like some of the jobs and excluded in our scope. I mean, a lot of GCs are on. We can't fund the project, obviously, right? We're a small business, and most GCs, well, I wouldn't say most, but some owners, they expect us to front the project and then delay the money down the line. We'll go out of business like that, So how do you move forward?
Yeah, and that's hard. That's the hard thing is when we're in the owner side, if we don't know what the agreements are between the subs and the primes, we could be paying for things to the prime, but we don't know how exactly the agreements are between them in terms of what scope is what. So we, as the owner, I think the best thing you could do is, we have a big mobilization cost in our a big mobilization item in our contracts that's supposed to help pay for material and pay for costs in the front end. And then for the change orders, it's just trying to get if we have all the right information, normally we can come to a quick agreement. But if you're a sub also, I mean, OCR is another contact, the small business group is another contact. If you feel you're being impacted, you can use those vehicles to voice issues you're having on your projects if you feel like a prime is not listening to you. So those are other avenues to go through to, if you feel like you don't see any movement on something you've voiced your impacts on.
Okay. Did that answer your question now, Mr. Fleming?
Yes, yes, it did. Just hopefully the BART canopies get on a roll, because we waiting. Other than that, that's pretty it.
Okay. 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 That's good to know. I mean, if you have any other questions with that project, let me know. We've had some turnover in our staff. So at one point, Mohammed was the technical specialist that was addressing that project. So if you have additional questions, regarding that, let me know, and then I'll, we'll get somebody to work on that and get some information about that for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I guess last, I just admitted Mr. Brown into the workshop. I hope you hadn't been out there too long, Mr. Brown.
Yes, good evening, all. Just catching up here. Apologize, I missed the beginning of this.
Oh, it's quite all right. And it's being recorded, so it will be available for you.
Okay, then thank you.
Absolutely. Was there anything that we could any questions, I guess, before we wrap it up? I think you were the last person I was going to check in with.
No questions right offhand. I'm just gonna have to review the video once it's online, and then maybe get with you or Nick if I have any additional questions.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. And we can make the presentation available for you, also the PowerPoint. I'll send you a PDF of that. So yeah, that's
Okay. All right. Thank you, Harry.
You're very welcome. No problem.
I have one more question. I
Absolutely.
have one more question, Harry.
Sure.
There's like the mentoring. You guys do the mentoring? Like I know you guys do the outreach and stuff like this, but like,
you know, honestly, I don't think we do. I know there was some discussion of that early on in our program, and I'm sorry not to be completely current with that. That's something I really have to look into. I think it's like I said, I'm not sure. I have to research that. I can get back to you on that. That might be something I have to check with our pre-award folks with.
okay, cool. Because that'll be great, especially for us small business women and minority business owners, because you guys are the big dogs, and if we can learn from how y'all got to the, we can dismiss a lot of these issues that we're having. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to try and help you, learn the ropes, and how to survive this this environment.
Yes.
And absolutely. And then knowing that you have, and again, and just having a lot of respect for for Sean, your company owner, and knowing the thought that she's put up to preserve her rights on certain contracts. So, I understand where you're coming from.
Gotcha.
So, okay, yeah. So, feel free to follow up with me. We'll figure that out. So was there, and I guess with that, is there anybody else? Any other questions? And I guess with that, I want to thank everybody for attending, and that will conclude our workshop for the evening.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, Harry. Great job.
All right, thank you.
And thank you again, Nick.
Thank
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely. And have a good evening.